Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Ken Yagi and I'm the Chief Veterinary Nursing Officer for Veterinary Emergency Group. Thanks for joining us again for another discussion with each of these individuals about our profession. So we have today Joelle Stingone, Betsy Hensley, Amy Newfield, and Erin Spencer joining us for the topic of some unconscious phrases that are out there that may detract from our profession. And so what are some phrases that you may have heard that detracts from our profession?
I think sometimes as a whole, support staff is one that I see that a veterinary nurse is part of the team and have with their own role, but and I understand the reason for support staff. You know, the doctor has made a plan and we're supporting them in that plan. However, we have our own role to play in that, so sometimes it can be seen to me as a detractor.
Yeah, I have actually even seen veterinary technicians and nurses be grouped into non-medical staff, which without thinking about it, also to the same point, very similarly, we have the doctors, but then when you group the other individuals in non-medical, I think that does detract away from what we do as a profession.
I agree. I think a lot of times we hear people say, I'm just a technician or I'm just a nurse, and that really detracts from what we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
I feel like it also takes away from the team aspects of working alongside of the doctors and the technicians or nurses as well.
Yeah, and so I think separating out like medical and nursing, and while we're trying to sort of elevate the role of nursing and keeping that separate but still together within the same team kind of is a challenge, right? And what do you guys think about the term paraprofessional then?
I mean, similar, I think that whenever you're in a profession that has struggled to get representation and understanding from the general public, as well as within our own profession, as well as within the medical community, because if you talk to a registered nurse or, the American Nursing Association, largely they view this profession sometimes as not a medical profession or not, and veterinary technicians and nurses not as medical professionals. And so when you group us in as paraprofessionals, we struggle with that. And so it definitely detracts from our profession when we use even terminology like that. To me, we have to set our own profession aside and group it as we are veterinary technicians, we are veterinary nurses. This is a profession, and what we are doing is nursing, right? That's the level of care that we're providing.
Any other thoughts?
I think Amy really nailed it, to be honest.
Which she said.
Yeah.
That's great, that's great. All right, so then maybe this is an interesting topic, like what are some common compliments that you've received that people have given you, but if they're actually not compliments?
When I state that I'm a veterinary technician or a veterinary nurse and they turn around and call me a veterinarian and don't acknowledge the fact that I just said I was a veterinary technician.
Yeah, and that probably comes from the lack of recognition for our profession and the title, and people not really knowing what the pieces of that veterinary team might be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any others?
I don't know if it's meant as a compliment or just they have made an assumption, but the when are you going to vet school, or have you thought about going to vet school, or when will you be going to vet school kind of thing. I have a lot of human nurses in my family, and I finally asked them at like a holiday, so how often have you ever been asked this question? And the only one at the table that had actually been asked when they were going to become a doctor was my sister-in-law, who's actually a physician's assistant, which the person didn't understand what a physician's assistant was, so thought she was in training to be a physician. And it's like, I don't understand why that happens to us. We get it all the time though, and I picked a different path. I'm not going at all.
Yeah, I think, especially if you're ever having a kind of similar conversation where you're a veterinary medical professional and you're having this conversation with the human medicine side, and they say, oh, what do you do? Oh, I work in medicine. You know, proudly, I work in medicine. And they go, oh, that's so wonderful. What do you do exactly? And you go, oh, well, I'm a veterinary technician. Oh, veterinary medicine. And I don't even think that they realize that they're detracting from our profession. And immediately you just feel like, well, okay, I'll just go into a corner now. Apparently that means nothing. Yeah, because you don't know how to respond to that. But there is very clear, like, oh, veterinary medicine, because all we do is play with puppies and kittens all day, apparently. Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of unconscious phrases that people, like unconscious things that people have in their minds for veterinarian side, right? Like, oh, you're not a real doctor, or, you know, talking about veterinarians and the human MDs being the real doctors or something like that.
I'm going to call it out. I mean, there's obviously, it's a huge industry issue outside of even our own medical field, and that's roping in human and veterinary medicine. Peloton, for example, I'm just going to say it, Peloton.
That was the example that came to mind.
Peloton. I mean, case in point, they gave a discount to medical professionals, but when veterinarians and veterinary technicians went to get the discount, they were told, no, sorry, you're not part of the medical community, which is crazy to me. But yeah, I mean, again, and more than in this country, at least 50 to 60% of all American households have a pet. So therefore, people who were saying no and declining the medical professional discount for veterinarians, half of them had animals when doing so. So it's crazy to me, but that's part of detracting from the profession. And then I don't even know, do you guys know whether or not they gave the discount to veterinary technicians and nurses?
I don't know, but I know it was a veterinarian with the post that had gone viral that had reached out to them, and it was something to the effect of,
they didn't quite get the terminology right, but they did end up giving it to veterinarians and veterinary assistants is what they called it, and so not veterinary technicians, but but with that said, it's including the entire veterinary team. And so I think a lot of that conversation surrounds like what is the legal classification of healthcare professionals and whether veterinary professionals are included in that. So there's some legislative changes and regulatory changes that probably play into that as well, because from the outside world, Amy's right, that people don't see veterinary medicine as a part of healthcare because of the legal classifications that are out there, which should be something that we try to change as well. Moving on with some of these unconscious phrases, what are some things that we say unconsciously that sort of undermine ourselves?
I mean, Betsy said the biggest one, I'm just a. Though Erin and I were having this conversation before we started, which is we don't say that anymore. In fact, we are probably the first ones. I mean, I agree. I think everybody at this table, we're the first ones to yell at someone if you hear the, I'm just a. We go, stop right there. I don't care what you're going to say after that, but you need to pull the just a out. Like, yeah. But that is, I mean, it's damaging. It's very damaging. Yeah. I think another one is, I definitely said this in my much younger years, which is, well, I'm not a doctor, so. I'm not a doctor, so just taking myself down a notch or two, you know, making sure they realize I'm not as good as, this career is not as important as, you know, and I don't think we realize that in our conversations, that the way that we present ourselves detracts from our own profession, and being recognized as a profession, because when we start a conversation off with a client, well, I'm not a doctor, you immediately detract from yourself, and so we have to be careful with that language, I think.
I've interestingly found that I still use the phrase, well, I'm not a doctor, but it's changed. I used to say, well, I'm not a doctor, so here's why I can't answer your question competently. Now it's, well, I'm not a doctor, however, here's all the things I know about this. I can't make that diagnosis for you, or I can't prescribe that, or I can't be the one to be that decision maker. But now it's with like I have the wrong 3 letters at the end of my name to be able to do that or something, and it's more of a joke that, of course I have this information, and I'm happy to share with you all the information I can up to diagnosing for you, because that is one of the 4 things that I legally cannot do for you. But so I actually realized, I heard myself saying that recently to somebody, and I said, oh, I try not to say this, but I realized it was coming from it was like a liability thing. Like, I'm not a doctor, so I'm going to give you all this information, but you can't say the doctor did, but you know, I have to give you what I can give you as a trained professional, and I think that helps that they then know, puts it in context, and it actually helps the situation.
And I think that's kind of interesting because when you mentioned the liability, we ask for more and more in terms of a profession and having a place in the veterinary team. But I think that obviously there's a range of people, and I think within our profession, there are some people that may shy away from, well, I don't want that liability, so I actually don't want more responsibilities. Like, what do you guys think about that? Should we be worried about liability? Should we be looking for more responsibility? Where is the right balance there?
Yes and yes, right? We should be worried about liability, and I think it's such muddy waters for our profession right now. But at the same time, I would prefer, personally, I would prefer that I have to have liability insurance if it meant I could fully practice my profession. That would be fine with me, and I know not everybody would agree with that, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say almost every year I have asked the AVMA whether or not their plight insurance will ever carry liability insurance for technicians. Like, as a technician, can I actually apply and get my own liability insurance? I mean, our registered nurse counterparts that we like to compare ourselves to an awful lot and should probably not do so, they carry their own malpractice insurance. And so we have to question, yeah, I agree on the liability factor. We want more responsibility, but does that carry also the malpractice insurance with it? And should it? I would, like you, I would want to carry the insurance if that meant I could do more. Absolutely.
I think the laws in each state obviously change that a little bit. In my home state, there are no laws about what I am as a technician or nurse or what I can and cannot do. So, and it's like Erin said, they're muddy waters and it's really hard to navigate them. Yeah, for sure.
At the very least, I think Erin's point is very valid in that if you're saying something like, well, I'm not the doctor, so I can't answer your question, or so I can't do this, then it probably should be shifting more towards, I'm not a doctor, but here's my opinion based off of my professional knowledge, experience, et cetera, that come along with me being a veterinary medical professional. Sound about right? Perfect. Any other thoughts that you want to put in before we wrap up on this conversation?
I think we just need to be careful as a profession how we present ourselves, and in everything that you say and do, make sure it comes with the pride and the knowledge and the fact that we are medical professionals. We're always going to have to fight for being utilized and for people valuing this as a true profession. But to Erin's point, when you're saying, I'm not a doctor, but I would even challenge to say I am a credentialed veterinary technician. I have gone to school. I am a medical professional in veterinary medicine. Wear that with a lot of pride. I think that's the only thing I would say.
Yeah. Thank you for that great summary there, Amy. And thank you all for joining us for this conversation. Please do subscribe to our channel and let us know in your comments like what you think about some of these topics, as well as what kinds of future topics that you'd like us to cover. And we'll be back again next time. Thank you very much for joining us.